Good evening, I'm Katerina Georgieva. This is CBC Windsor News. Thanks for watching. Tonight, crowded buses have riders calling for better transit. Plus, the first in a three-part series looking at the real cost of electric vehicles. Tonight, a deep dive on affordability. And disappointment for the Chatham-colored All-Stars. There's been a push to get them into the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame to no avail. The long road to recovery at Transit Windsor seems to be coming to an end. Schedules are back to normal. This after shutting down the service during the early days of the pandemic and operating at reduced schedules throughout recent waves. Riders are now being met with something unfamiliar: packed buses. Users tell CBC's TJ Deer they want more buses, but there's a familiar hurdle in the way.
When I go home from the university, it's pretty full at that time, and bus number 1C, I guess, is pretty full.
Transit Windsor's annual report says ridership has rebounded to about 95% of pre-pandemic levels. That's created situations like this: packed buses with no room for anyone. Sometimes buses are so full, drivers have to ask riders to take the next bus. With weekend service not as frequent as weekday service, that's left potential riders stranded and created issues for people with disabilities.
People that have impairments can't get to the seats and they're not being given up. I do think the buses are overcrowded when it does come time to having personal space.
One rider offered a solution to the overcrowding problem.
I feel like maybe they could, incorporate little more buses and more routes. They could introduce maybe multiple buses at the same time.
A transit advocate says she's not surprised to hear people's concerns, saying transit doesn't work in Windsor. She wants to see Windsor City Council approve the construction of a new garage, saying it would allow for more routes to be created and more buses to be deployed.
There's a lot of places that people need to go to, especially like industrial areas for work. They can't get to those places for jobs, and they have to lose out on jobs for those reasons.
Transit Windsor is sympathizing with riders' concerns. Along with an unexpected surge in ridership since the return to full service, their executive director says staffing is one of the reasons more buses cannot be deployed.
We lost a lot of drivers through the pandemic, through retirements, just through attrition, service reductions, et cetera. But now that we're back, running full steam, we still have additional drivers that we need to be able to provide that level of service.
City Council voted for a $100 million investment in transit in November to upgrade the existing infrastructure and the fleet, but not to build a second garage. Although Craig is grateful for the support, he says there's still a lot of work to be done to fix overcrowded buses. TJ Deer, CBC News, Windsor.
The woman who runs a local homeless center has concerns about a potential bylaw around panhandling. Councillor Fred Francis asked for city staff to come up with one this week. He wants a bylaw that limits potentially dangerous interactions between panhandlers and pedestrians. Now, it would not ban panhandling itself. Windsor has tried this a few times. Staff say it could face a court challenge. Any new bylaw would mirror what's already in the existing provincial legislation. The person who runs Street Help was once homeless, and she says a new bylaw is not the right move.
Public thinking needs to change. When I was homeless, I sat on a street corner, Letton Park, and I sat there, and the shoppers, it used to be Pond's Big V, that's what it was. They let me there. I wasn't causing any harm. And it's the only tool I had for survival. So I understand when you have to do it, but I figure too, we have to be careful of laws because they could fly over onto bylaws, that could fly over onto charities and churches alike, because we're all panhandling in essence.
This week, we're taking a look at the real cost of electric vehicles and taking a deep dive into how electrification will impact Windsor-Essex. First, we're looking at affordability. The government wants every new vehicle you buy by 2035 to be all electric, an ambitious goal. But given the price point, who can even afford one? I took a look.
So look, here's a great example of an automobile that would actually provide somebody with decent transportation and give them a low price point.
It's a used car, under $20,000, but it's not an electric vehicle. What are we looking at for EVs?
Oh, EVs, oh my goodness. So here it is. So far, what we're seeing is everything's going to be in excess of $55,000 to $60,000 Canadian at this point in time.
That's on his lot, of course. There's a wide range of price points. Nissan, Chevrolet, and Kia offering vehicles in the $40,000 to $50,000 range. But the higher prices, not just an EV problem. It's auto in general. According to this report from October by autotrader.ca, the average price of a new vehicle in Canada was about $57,500, the highest ever recorded. For used, average price was about $37,000, almost 20% more than same time the previous year, though the prices softened a bit between July and October.
That, of course, has put a strain on households when it comes to actual monthly payments. The monthly payments have gone from somewhere in that $500 to $600 range. And if you're on the Lexus side, for example, whether it's new or used, it could be in the $1,200 a month range. So now we're getting into mortgage payments on automobiles. So it's a little tough.
The costs of EVs are high because of the technology. Mark Stewart with Stellantis explains further.
The more competitive we are, the more our consumers are going to be able to afford the product because the technology is expensive, right? At this moment, it's about 40-45% more expensive than a classic ICE powertrain.
But it's not just a price point issue. Supply is tight. Godfrey doesn't have any on his lot.
Look, the truth is we should have them here by now. We should have had them here 2 years ago, probably should have had them minimally last year. They're not here for a variety of reasons. I think everybody's heard the supply chain concerns, whether it be chips, whether it be glass, whether it be rubber. There's too many factors that have impacted the supply chain.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau acknowledged the long wait lists during a recent visit to the Windsor Assembly Plant.
We know that the demand is super high. We're going to continue to make sure we're investing in facilities that we've been investing in over the past year and seeing big investments come into Canada in the zero-emission vehicle ecosystem to make sure we're able to meet the rising demand and the excitement Canadians have for electric vehicles.
Meanwhile, Canadians are already struggling with inflation, cost of groceries, housing, especially in a city like Windsor, where about 11% of households are low income. Median income in Windsor is about $63,000. At an automotive conference in Detroit last month, experts talked about some of these issues, about how high costs are plaguing families across the continent and how transportation can be a real barrier for low-income and moderate-income families when it comes to their ability to live their best lives. But another expert pointed out that it might be a tough pitch to get automakers to actually bring down their price points when they've managed to achieve a seller's market. And yet, this week, two major automakers appear to be starting a price war. Ford is slashing its new Mustang Mach-E electric vehicle by $6,000 after Tesla dropped its prices by 20% in some cases. This senior industry analyst says EVs have to become more affordable.
One could argue that the average consumer can't afford these vehicles, that they're often secondary vehicles in many households and luxury purchases. That will need to change if we're going to hit these aggressive, targets of 100% better electric vehicles by 2035.
Trudeau points to $5,000 federal EV rebates as a way to help the issue.
We're really happy that we've put forward rebates to help Canadians buy electric vehicles because more and more people want to be able to do it and know that as fuel prices continue to remain volatile, Canadian clean electricity is a great way of moving forward in the right way.
The province, however, scrapped its rebates a few years ago with no plans to bring them back. All the while, families on a budget already have a hard time finding a personal vehicle at a low price point. If I walked in and I told you I'm looking for a used vehicle,
yes, please,
and I want the cheapest vehicle that you got, what car would you show me? What are my options if my budget was real tight?
So look, honestly, my lowest cost vehicles are going to be my Toyota Corollas.
Okay, so it's these ones here?
And when I say that, these are not going to be, honestly, you're going to be in that $25,000 to $30,000 range. So these are my highest, my lowest value, if you want to call them that, or my highest value vehicles because they have the lower value points on them.
And they're already a few years old.
That's correct. They're going to be at least 2019, 2020, probably have somewhere between 20 and 40,000 kilometers on them.
I asked him, once he gets EVs on his lot, is he worried about being able to sell at the higher price points?
I also think that what will happen is manufacturers are going to recognize, distributors are going to recognize that, look, we need to bring our price points down to match what consumers can afford. Let's face it. I used the word capitalism with you a little earlier. We're capitalists. We're here to actually continue to sell automobiles. We're not here to, house them and turn this into a museum at some point in time of battery electric vehicles that people can't afford. We want to be able to sell those vehicles. And so we'll find ways to distribute those vehicles to consumers. I just hope it's not on these long-term finance contracts that extend out into, instead of 7 or 8 years, longer terms than that. I hope we don't turn into a mortgage company on finance contracts with battery electric vehicles.
So that was the first in a 3-part series that we are rolling out this week, taking a look at the real cost of electric vehicles. Tomorrow, we'll take a look at the local labor landscape, and Friday, a look at how electric vehicles might impact the environment. We'll have all of our coverage here on our nightly newscast, and you can read more on cbc.ca/Windsor. Another round of disappointment for those who have been following the Chatham-colored All-Stars. The historic baseball team was the first to play in an Ontario championship with black players, winning it once. Many feel the team deserves to be in the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame. But as the CBC's Jason Vio tells us, they've been passed over once again.
1947. Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier in the major leagues in 1947. He was the first black baseball player in the MLB when he played for the Brooklyn Dodgers. But more than a decade before that,
history of that era.
The Chatham-colored All-Stars became the first team with black players to compete in an Ontario championship. Blake Harding's father, Wilfred Boomer Harding, and 2 of his uncles all played for the All-Stars. They won the Provincial Ontario Baseball Amateur Association Championship in 1934, beating their opponents in hostile conditions.
They held their head up. They didn't complain. They didn't whine. They had a rough go playing in 1934, 35. It was rough. They were spit at. 6-year-old kids would throw rocks at them, encouraged by their parents.
Harding remembers watching the team play in the 1950s and the 1960s at home in Chatham.
They were kind of almost like the Harlem Globetrotters of baseball. They could put on a show. They could play baseball.
You'll find the team in the Chatham Sports Hall of Fame, the Negro Hall of Fame in Philadelphia, and as of last year, they're in the Canadian Sports Hall of Fame, something the Toronto Blue Jays celebrated.
They were a good team.
Harding says he can't understand why the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame hasn't taken notice. Harding says it would mean a lot.
Just the recognition for what they did. And it wasn't just about baseball. It was about how they changed the community, It opened doors, for my generation and my kids, my grandkids.
CBC News reached out to the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame to understand how it selects people and teams to be inducted. They haven't responded. But at 74 years old, Harding says he hopes he's around if and when it happens.
It means a lot to the community. It means a lot personally. But you know what? If it doesn't happen, it doesn't take anything away from what they've done and what they've accomplished.
Jason Vio, CBC News, Windsor.
The funeral for Tyre Nichols took place today in Memphis, Tennessee. The 29-year-old died after a brutal beating by 5 police officers in a violent arrest captured on security and police body cameras. The officers are now facing murder charges. CBC's Chris Reyes has this report.
At his funeral service at a church in Memphis, Tennessee, Tyre Nichols' casket was showered with song and scripture.
We have come into this place locked in solidarity across the nation and world to celebrate the life of Tyre Nichols, a good person, a beautiful soul.
Mr. and Mrs. Wells, he is your son. Now he is our son. And he is always God's son.
Thousands attended the service. Sitting in the front row, Nichols' family, his sister shared words of heartbreak.
I screamed at God, asking how could he let this happen?
Also at the service, the family of George Floyd, Eric Garner and Breonna Taylor, Black Americans who were killed by police. Vice President Kamala Harris sat beside Nichols' parents.
Mrs. Wells, Mr. Wells, you have been extraordinary in terms of your strength, your courage, and your grace
Veteran civil rights activist Reverend Al Sharpton delivered the eulogy and very quickly into his speech spoke directly to the 5 officers who have been criminally charged with Nichols' death.
In the city that Dr. King lost his life, not far away from that balcony, you beat a brother to death.
This celebration of Nichols' life comes just days after Memphis police released a series of videos showing police brutally beating Nichols on January 5. He was pulled over and immediately shoved to the ground. He was tased and beaten by a baton. He died in hospital 3 days later. At the service, a call to action from Vice President Harris.
We demand that Congress pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. Joe Biden will sign it.
The legislation includes sweeping reforms to address excessive use of force, racial profiling, and police misconduct. The service was filled with calls for justice, but also stories celebrating Nichols' life, his love for photography, skateboarding, sunsets. Chris Reyes, CBC News, New York.
That there is the Pan-African flag raised at the University of Windsor. Organizers say it's the first time the flag has been raised on campus. Students and staff have pushed for action against anti-Black racism, and those at today's event see this as a proud step forward.
You know, we're not quite sure if we're making a difference or, you know, if we're making progress. But I think I'm, you know, really proud today to see the gathering and the support, but also to see us raising this flag for the very first time in our history, and hopefully it won't be the last.
This is a step. You know, we've had a really hard time with anti-Black racism, like most universities have, like the world has, like Canada and America have. And so to see something that I can quickly identify as belonging to me allows me to also see myself represented here at the university.
Live look outside there again, just delightful to see the sun setting at this time of night. We had a really beautiful sunny day today, even though it was chilly. I didn't mind. We got some more sunshine on the way tomorrow before it gets cloudy again, and then some more flurries on the way. Colette Kennedy will be here after the break. She'll talk us through it. Colette Kennedy is here now for a look at our local weather. Colette, those of us enjoying the sun need to really soak it up tomorrow for the little bit that we get it for.
Yeah, that's right. You know, because we've got that colder air that's going to be coming in too. So it's nice to have some sun for a while anyway. And tomorrow there's actually a bit of a bump in the temperatures before that colder air comes in behind our front. So an up and down day Thursday. Cool temperatures tonight, temperatures come up and then they go back down again. Breezy conditions as well. And some flurries in there tomorrow afternoon and through the overnight. So just be aware of that too, kind of blowing around. I mean, that's not heavy enough to really pose a problem, but still at times it can reduce visibility a bit. But that's later in the day. And then you brace yourself with the cold air coming in, but it's brief. It's not sticking around very long, 36 to not even 48 hours for these much colder temperatures that are going to be coming at us again. I mean, besides what we've been experiencing like right now where it's -6. Chatham-Kent not reporting at the moment, -5 for Sarnia. And we're looking at the winds coming in from a south to southwesterly direction, the sustained winds. So based off of those, that's where we get into our wind chill and what it feels like. So that's right now. Overnight tonight, we'll see those wind chills dipping down in that -18 range or close to it. But also looking ahead at the winds tomorrow, those will be picking up and coming in from the south, gusty at times. So we'll deal with that. And then they'll change direction later in the day once the front goes through. Then we get a west to northwesterly flow, and that's when the cold air will be coming in. So those are kind of the ups and downs. The clearer conditions for tonight, the exception is going to be here in the lee of Georgian Bay with that westerly flow, so some winter weather travel advisories there. And then rolling ahead to look at tomorrow morning, overnight tonight and tomorrow morning, with some of the sunshine that we will still have. And then we're going to find as that front approaches, we get the clouds coming in, scattered flurries moving through as well. For the afternoon commute, yeah, we'll probably see this timing-wise that it's there and into tomorrow evening. Then behind it, we get some clearing other than in the areas, I'm talking to you, London, where the wind flow is such in the direction coming through that you get those streamers setting up of lake effect. And so they are localized, but could be some heavier amounts of snowfall. Overnight tonight, let's look at the wind chill. I said -18, close, yeah. Pretty close, with the temperatures of -9 to, in most cases, including for Windsor, to -10. So a cool start tomorrow morning. That low we hit in the overnight hours. By tomorrow morning, once the sun comes up, you know, about 8, it will have rebounded to about -7, -6, and then it keeps going up, -1. And then behind the front, -15 for the low into Friday, a high of -10. Friday night into Saturday, -17. But then look what happens. I told you it doesn't last forever.
There you go.
We're above freezing as we go into the end of the weekend and next week.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Colette.
You're welcome.
When we come back, a green comet you won't want to miss. Stay with us. A radioactive capsule about the size of a pea has been found and safely recovered in Australia's vast outback. The capsule fell off a truck along a 1,400-kilometer stretch of highway more than 2 weeks ago. A very active search had been underway for a little less than a week. CBC's Abby Kuhadasan has the details.
When you consider the scope of the research area, locating this object was a monumental challenge. The search groups have quite literally found the needle in the haystack.
Authorities had been looking for a silver capsule the size of a green pea, about 6 millimeters, and the search area was along the Great Northern Highway in Western Australia, about 1,400 kilometers long. That's roughly the distance between Saskatoon and Thunder Bay. Authorities say one of the search vehicles was successful this morning. It was traveling about 70 kilometers per hour when detection equipment picked up the radiation emitting from the capsule. The area where it was found has been cordoned off as experts check the 20-meter hot zone for any contamination. The tiny device is commonly used in the mining industry, but it can be hazardous because it contains a small amount of cesium-137, which is radioactive material, and it can cause radiation sickness and burns. Prolonged exposure can be cancer-causing. The worry was someone would come across the capsule and unknowingly handle it. But the device has now been found.
We're not aware of any injuries to anybody, any community member. It does not appear to have moved. It appears to have fallen off the truck and landed on the side of the road. It is remote enough that it's not in any major community, so it is unlikely that anybody has been exposed to the capsule.
The device itself will soon be moved to a secure facility in Perth, and the mining company Rio Tinto says it fell off the back of a delivery truck. A spokesperson has apologized and says they'll cooperate with any investigation. Abby Kuhadasan, CBC News, London.
An incredibly rare sight is now visible in the northern night sky. It's a green comet that hasn't been this close to Earth since the Stone Age. This is a time-lapse assembled by Tim Doucette with the Deep Sky Eye Observatory near Yarmouth, Nova Scotia. The color is just one reason this comet is a remarkable sight. It hasn't been in this part of the solar system in 50,000 years. The comet is more than 384 million kilometers away, so astronomers say your best bet is using a telescope or binoculars. But because comets move very slowly, you'll have most of this month to see it. And that is it for CBC Windsor News, and a reminder to tune back in tomorrow for part 2 of our Real Cost of EVs coverage on our newscast, and you can read more online at cbc.ca/Windsor. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.